Let's talk about the polls and whether we can trust them to pick the next U.S. president.
A new poll here, new poll there. Joe Biden with a 9-point lead.
President is behind, and behind by a lot.
Most national polls have Joe Biden with the lead over Donald Trump. Sound familiar?
Polls showing Hillary Clinton ahead.
This is unheard of in recent presidential politics.
Just ask Hillary Clinton how that turned out for her.
This loss hurts.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
The problem is polls are not predictors. I'll repeat that. Polls are not predictors.
So if polls can't predict a winner, why are there so many of them? Can we trust them? And while we're talking predictions, will Trump win again? When it comes to picking the winner of a presidential race, Alan Lichtman thinks opinion polls are a waste of time. He says they're snapshots, not crystal balls.
Forget the polls. Forget the pundits. Don't look at who's up and down day to day. Keep your eye on the big picture of presidential strength and performance.
Who's Alan Lichtman? Only the guy who's predicted every winner since 1984. That's 9 U.S. presidents in a row. He predicted Ronald Reagan's win nearly 2 years before the vote. He called Barack Obama's re-election in 2012, when many people thought the race was too close to call. And against almost all the polls, he picked Donald Trump at 2016. So who is Lichtman picking for 2020? We'll get to that in a bit. But first, let's talk about the polls. There are national polls, state polls, and a whole lot of other polls. And they all do things differently. U.S. broadcasters like CNN and Fox News do their surveys over the phone. Associated Press and the Pew Research Center recruit people offline, but their surveys are online. Pollsters might ask questions like, would you say that your choice of Trump is more a vote for Trump or more a vote against Biden?
It's key to keep them as neutral as possible. We don't want to tilt people towards one answer or another.
But there are many other factors that can influence the results. Things like who paid for the poll, because that could bias the pollster. How were participants chosen? Where are they from? And that's where something called weighting comes in. It's a calculation used by pollsters to make sure their sample is representative of an area, state, or the whole country. They adjust the sample for things like education, age, and gender.
If you think that 60% of voters are going to be women, then you want to make sure that if you talk to 1,000 people, that 600 of those roughly are women.
So those are the kinds of things pollsters try to do to stay as accurate as possible. But in 2016, a lot were off the mark. Back then, some said Clinton's chances of winning were high, but she didn't win. That's because while Clinton got more votes overall, what's called the popular vote, she lost the Electoral College, which is the voting system used to decide the presidency.
Our best days are still ahead of us.
That rarely happens, and the pollsters didn't see it coming.
When polls do fail, they get outsized attention. And those failures are spectacular. It's the same reason why plane crashes are extremely rare, but when they do happen, they lead all the news.
So how'd the polls get it so wrong? Well, one of the biggest mistakes in 2016 happened with state polls. The Pew Research Center says there were too many cheap and fast polls and too many college-educated people were interviewed.
College graduates, for whatever reason, are more likely to take surveys. They had too many college graduates, so they had too many Clinton supporters and not enough Donald Trump supporters to be accurate.
Prior to 2016, education levels didn't really predict a lot about how people would vote, but in that election, it turned out that they did.
On Election Day, two things happened. First, there was a higher turnout in rural counties and a lower turnout in urban ones. That helped Trump. And second, there were a lot of undecided voters who chose Trump at the last minute.
The only way to capture that is to keep polling until the bitter end. But even then, there are still voters who only make up their minds in the voting booth.
But some of them didn't even get that far. Research suggests that in 2016, a lot of people were discouraged from voting because according to the polls, Clinton looked like a shoo-in.
That might have caused some people to stay home because they believed the race was uncompetitive.
Pollsters say they've learned from their mistakes, and they better hope so, because the combination of Clinton's loss and Trump's win convinced a lot of people that polls are just junk. But 2 years later, the polls for the US midterms helped repair some of the damage.
While 2016 was in so many ways a miss, in the 2018 midterms in the United States, polls functioned very well. They forecast a Democratic landslide, and that was exactly what we got.
And now, the polls are back with a vengeance.
New polling on the 2020 presidential race, former Vice President Joe Biden with a lead over President Trump.
President Trump behind in 2 states.
The poll also shows Biden with a 10-point lead.
It would take a polling failure much, much larger than on the scale we saw in 2016 for all of those numbers to be wrong.
But David also says a lot can still change, and he's not alone.
Is a poll in early September going to tell you accurately what's going to happen in Wisconsin in November? You know, as someone that's been in the field for 20 years, I don't think so.
That doesn't mean we can't ever trust polls. There are ways you can verify them. And don't just read one poll, read many. It's like getting more than one opinion. The accepted wisdom is that polls do a good job of taking the pulse of public opinion. Are people worried about losing their jobs? Do they care about racial inequality? What about the pandemic and their health?
Frankly, even with their limitations, which can be substantial, polls are still the best tool that society has to get information about what's going on with the entire public.
So let's bring back Alan Lichtman and find out whether he thinks Trump will win again. He's created what he calls the 13 keys, the keys to the White House. If Trump loses out on 6 or more, Lichtman says the president is gone. So, number 1 is midterm elections. The Republicans in 2018 did badly, so that's strike 1 against Trump. Number 2 is party nomination. He didn't have to fight for it, so score 1 for Trump. 3 is incumbency. Obviously, that's a win for Trump. Any third parties running? Nope, he gets another key. The short-term economy. Well, the US is in a recession, bad for the president. Outlook for the long-term economy? Also not good. Any major policy changes from the previous administration? There have been plenty. Another one for Trump. Key number 8 is social unrest. And race relations in the US are awful, so Trump loses out there too. Then there's scandal.
My favorite key, oh my gosh, only the 3rd president in history ever to be impeached by the full House, plus all kinds of other scandals. That counts against him.
Trump takes key number 10, no foreign policy or military failures. But he loses out on number 11, which is foreign policy or military successes.
His initiatives in North Korea, and the Middle East, and Syria have all gone for naught. Yes, he killed General Soleimani, but I guarantee you 95% of the American people couldn't tell you who he is today. It's not like killing Osama bin Laden.
The next one asks whether the incumbent Donald Trump is inspirational and charismatic. According to Lichtman, he is a flashy showman, but he only appeals to a narrow slice of the electorate. And finally, is the challenger, Joe Biden, charismatic and inspirational? Lichtman isn't convinced.
Joe Biden is a decent, empathetic guy, but he's no Barack Obama or John F. Kennedy.
So will Trump remain in the White House? According to Lichtman, the president has lost out on 7 of the 13 keys.
One more than necessary to say, sorry, Trump, this time you're not going to win.
So he's pretty confident, but there's a catch. Lichtman says 2 things could throw out his prediction: Russian hackers and what he calls voter suppression by the Trump administration. And 2020 is far from an ordinary election year. The pandemic and the ruined global economy made sure of that. This race is still a tough one to call, no matter what the polls say. The original interview with Alan Lichtman was conducted by our colleagues at The Take, which is an Al Jazeera podcast. You can listen to their episode about polls wherever you get your podcasts. I'll see you next week.